Just move on now to our discussants. I mean, if I can draw a couple of threads together there, which you may or may not want to comment on. There's the obvious and evident fragilities in the US financial system, the Western financial system. There's also what Tom was talking about, the increasing US political polarization, if you like, dysfunctionality along with that. High concentrations of wealth in the US and, according to Victor's analysis, in China as well, plus the evident internal fragilities in China. Does any of this help us understand, plus of course what Professor De Tecco was talking about, the export-import led models, does any of the domestic issues we were talking about help us understand the US-China relationship and the imbalance between them? Orville, you first.
Well, I think, it seems to me that this is the, and there always is one, the China stealth panel. It's not mentioned in the title of the panel, but it seems no matter what river you're navigating, there's always a large tributary leading back to China. So here we are. So this happens to be the area that I'm most interested in. I think that with China's prominence, it does tend to be a tremendous lightning rod for, I think, sometimes heap our awe on it, our praise on it, our criticism, our fears. It's a magnet for many things. I think what we've been reminded of on this panel is that any rebalancing really has two aspects. One is the international aspect, the bilateral, the multilateral, and of course China has a problem within its own country in rebalancing. So there are these two aspects, and if we're going to talk about obstacles to rebalance, I think that's a constructive way for us to look at the problem. It seems almost trite to say, but it is worth, again, highlighting that in ways I think we are incompletely willing to acknowledge the United States and China, the EU and China, indeed the whole world, has no longer any option of divorce. We are insolubly bound together through the global financial system and many, many, many other common problems. It's almost as if we're separate bodies, and slowly we've acquired common use of the same vital organs. So this does compel us, I think, to look at this question of obstacles to rebalancing and take it very, very seriously. Now, I thought in just the few minutes that I have, maybe I would just try to suggest a few of the areas that make it very difficult for China. Tom Ferguson, I think, has done a very good job in showing that, if you're going to clap your hands, you've got to have two hands. And the United States is certainly a very big actor, and Washington is paralyzed. And if you're going to talk about rebalancing the global financial system, paralysis is not a good place for one partner to find themselves in. On the other hand, China also has a whole host of problems. Many of them, I should say, really transcend economics, but have a profound impact on what can be done economically. This may be, in economic parlance, more sort of on the behavioral side. So I thought I would just maybe try to sketch out a few of those, because if we are going to cooperate, which is an absolute essential requirement, it seems to me, to bring this thing into any new equilibrium, we're going to have to understand those better. And you look at the areas where we must cooperate. It isn't simply trade and finance. Climate change would be another very obvious area. Nuclear proliferation, world health. So these are the ways in which we are insolubly tied together. I think the first thing that makes it so difficult for China to sort of fully enter the common discourse, we heard yesterday Gordon Brown speak of China's need to make a decision to be either fully in the world system, it couldn't be half in. China is half in for a variety of reasons, I think one of which is its rather strict and old-fashioned notion of sovereignty. It has a very keen sense that it doesn't want anyone intruding in its affairs. Sovereignty is the protection, and thus it is very loath to intrude in anyone else's affairs. And this makes it a very reluctant partner, whether you're talking about global finance, humanitarian intervention, transparency in other countries. There's a whole host of problems, climate change, which the world now finds themselves embroiled in, which require a kind of an abridgment of sovereignty. And China still is very resistant to that notion. Now, it was very interesting, recently in the Libya question, they did abstain on the question of intervening. So there are signs of their willingness to edge a little bit closer towards fuller involvement, but that's a critical question. And I think the question of sovereignty does grow out of a tremendous sensitivity, as you all know, to the idea of foreign dominance. And this means that foreign pressure, too, even though it may be very logical, we look at the currency discussions with the United States, most often has a very untoward effect. In fact, the more pressure you put on China, very often, the less you get out of them. And we should note that gone are the days when a prime minister from Europe, president of the United States goes to China, and in advance of that, there are negotiations and X number of political dissidents are released or other genuflections are made to the power of the outside world. That era is over, emphatically over. And this means that China's sensitivity towards this kind of pressure, dominance, now can act itself out in a much more firm and aggressive way. And so pressure really yields very, very little in my view. It's an interesting question whether one should still exert it. As a matter of principle, we maybe can talk about that. The other thing I think which mitigates against China fully entering into the global commonweal as an actor that many of us assume a role it should play given its new power is, I think, its lack of experience. And we look at Beijing and Shanghai and many other cities. We look at the high-speed rails, tunnels, bridges, airports, ports, highways, and we are very impressed. I mean, in many ways, China has delivered. And yet, beneath that veneer of extraordinary accomplishment, which one must be impressed by, there still is a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of tentativeness about how to be involved in the world, whether it's mergers and acquisitions abroad, international negotiations. There's not a tremendous degree of comfort in playing that role. I think many Westerners felt, that when the idea of a G2 was lofted, China's powerful. Why shouldn't it step up to the plate? And China just backed off. It, in truth, is not ready, I think, in its own view to play such a role. It's very reluctant to step up to that plate. And in a certain sense, I think one could say that's good. It also has liabilities. It's good in the sense that it means that China is being cautious, it's being temperate, and it's moving slowly. It's bad in the sense that we really do need China at the table in an active, fully involved role, particularly as we see decline in the United States and in the EU. But here's a sort of a last idea. I do think that China is edging closer and closer towards fuller engagement, which will now allow the world to possibly rebalance a lot of the systems that are out of balance. However, I think one might look at it this way. China's accomplishments are great. The problems are enormous, as we know the party recognizes, even if we do not always, because they're very nervous. But there is a kind of a lag behind accomplishment and sort of the psychological sense that they are entitled and that they should feel the same level of confidence that I think is required for a country to act in a global manner. And I think this has a great long historical legacy, but it does condition their willingness to really move into these discussions in an active, confident, aggressive, and a way that puts them fully at the table in many of the questions that we've been discussing here today. So I think the remedy is probably simply to wait things out.